On today's episode of Cubs 360, we're going to talk about what the Cubs roster looks like right now as we head into the first spring training game, which is scheduled for Thursday against the Dodgers. And we're going to compare that to the rest of the division and seeing where the Cubs rank in terms of standings projections. We're also going to look over the Alex Bregman contract with the Boston Red Sox and seeing whether the Cubs made a good decision whether to not sign him or not. We're also going to go over some last-minute trade rumors to see if there is another deal in the works for the Chicago Cubs before the first game of spring training. And also, we are going to talk about some goals that I personally would like to set for the Chicago Cubs this year, things that I would like to see. That's all happening soon on Cubs 360. What's up, Cubs fans? This is episode 7 of the Cubs 360 podcast. I'm your host, Shaq. If you're interested in this content, feel free to like and subscribe and also follow us on Twitter at Cubs360X. So there's a bit to get to in this episode. The last episode we made was a very long time. Nothing really happened in between this episode and the previous one other than the Ryan Presley deal, which was kind of a small move, but we got a closer there. But there are some things that I do want to go over in this video before we officially kick off spring training with some games. So we're going to go over the lineup for the Chicago Cubs and seeing whether they can compete with the rest of the division or how the division stacks up against us. So as most of you know, our outfield consists of Ian Happ, PCA, and Kyle Tucker. Our infield, now that Bregman is not a Chicago Cub, will consist of Michael Busch at first base, Nico Horner at second, Dansby Swanson at shortstop, and Matt Shaw at third base. We also have Miguel Amaya and Carson Kelly at the catcher position, Seiya Suzuki DH, and as of right now, our pitching rotation currently consists of Justin Steele, Shota Imanaga, Jameson Taillon, Matt Boyd, and one of Javier Assad or Colin Ray in that fifth slot in the starting rotation. So there's a bit of an opening there for that fifth starting job, whether those guys or even Ben Brown could get that spot. So that position is really up for grabs for anybody, and it's going to take some hard work in spring training to get that. I am not super confident about the rotation as is. I do think they need another starter to really lock that up, in my opinion. But other than that, this roster looks really solid. One of the more solid rosters we've seen the Cubs put out ever since they had to get rid of the 2016 core that obviously consisted of Rizzo, Chris Bryant, and Javi Baez. So with that, there are no players from that team on the roster anymore now that Kyle Hendricks left for the Los Angeles Angels this offseason. And I'm looking forward to seeing what this roster can do. I think, like I said, it's one of the better rosters that we've put out there. But we're still going to be competing with some teams in the Central, particularly the Milwaukee Brewers. As most of you know, the Brewers lost Devin Williams and Willy Adames as big highlights there. And they currently have still a solid roster. Their roster currently consists of William Contreras at catcher, Rhys Hoskins at first, Bryce Turang at second, Joey Ortiz at shortstop, Oliver Dunn third, Sal Frelick at left field, Garrett Mitchell at center, Jackson Chourio at right, Christian Yelich, who's probably going to be a DH at this point. They have Freddie Peralta, Tobias Myers, and Brandon Woodruff. We'll see if Brandon Woodruff is healthy by the time opening day rolls around. Nestor Cortez and Aaron Civale. For the St. Louis Cardinals, they have Ivan Herrera at catcher. Wilson Contreras shifts over to first now that they lost Paul Goldschmidt to the Yankees. Brendan Donovan will play second. Mason Wynn will be at short. They didn't trade Nolan Arenado, so the expectation is that he will be a St. Louis Cardinal come opening day, so he stays at third. Lars Nootbaar will be at left field, Michael Ciani at center field, Jordan Walker at right, and Alec Burleson at the DH slot. Sonny Gray, Eric Fetty, Miles Mikolas, Andre Palante, and Michael McGreevy will fill out the starting rotation for the Cardinals. Meanwhile, for the Cincinnati Reds, I think the Cubs and the Reds were the only two teams that particularly improved. I think the Reds not as much as to the extent of the Cubs, but they did improve in some ways. Tyler Stevenson is the catcher. Spencer Steers at first. They have Matt McLean at second. Ellie De La Cruz obviously at shortstop. Gavin Lux at third. Austin Hayes at left field. TJ Friedel at center. Jake Fraley at right field. And Jamer Candelario at DH. And obviously for their starting rotation, they have Hunter Green, Brady Singer, who they got in the Jonathan India deal with the Kansas City Royals, Nick Martinez, Nick Lodolo, and Andrew Abbott. For the Pittsburgh Pirates, they have Joey Bart, Spencer Horwitz, Nick Gonzalez, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, Brian Hayes, Tommy Pham, O'Neal Cruz, Brian Reynolds, and Andrew McCutchen. For their starting rotation, they have Paul Skeens, Mitch Keller, Jared Jones, Bailey Falter, and Johan Oviedo. So I think the Cubs are in a bit of a position of strength with a lot of these other teams. I don't think they have the best at every position, but I do think overall as a collective team, I do think they have the best of them all, at least on paper, because the Milwaukee Brewers, even though they lose players, they still find ways to win. Heck, they even lost Craig Counsell, obviously, to the Cubs last offseason, and Pat Murphy, who was the bench coach who took over for the manager position, ended up winning NL Manager of the Year this past season with the Brewers. So I do think the Cubs are obviously the best team on paper. I do think if things click, and the bullpen for the Cubs also improved drastically, which was a big need because the bullpen is really what cost us a ton of games this past season. So I think the Cubs are looking like the favorite to win the Central Division, as they should. I do think they end up winning the Central unless something absolutely ridiculous happens. I think it's really a two-horse race between the Chicago Cubs and the Milwaukee Brewers, but I'm giving the slight edge to the Cubs at the moment. So that's really where I see it between all the other teams, and I did go over this in a previous episode in the offseason. If I were to rank the teams in a projected standings right now, I would say the Cubs going first, Milwaukee goes second, I would say Cincinnati goes third. I do think St. Louis goes fourth and Pittsburgh goes fifth. I do think the Pirates look like the better team than St. Louis, but there's just something with the Pirates where they just find a way to stink it up. So with that said, I'm pretty confident in the standings that I have set out right there. Let's get to our next order of business, and that is going over the Alex Bregman contract. So as most of you know, the Cubs were heavily rumored with Alex Bregman. However, they do not land him, as Alex Bregman, with the initial contract, he signs a 3-year deal worth $120 million with the Boston Red Sox. There's a ton of deferrals in there. So the real contract, without the deferrals and the signing bonuses or whatever additional money is left in there, goes out to essentially $90 million over 3 years. There's opt-outs in there as well. So the Cubs do not land Alex Bregman, so they will stick with Matt Shaw at third base, which I do think might be a longer-term move that benefits them. I do think Alex Bregman is a very phenomenal player. I do think he's pretty much slightly overrated based off what he was asking for. I do think if he were to get a 6-7 year deal, that wouldn't have panned out well, in my opinion, for any team that signed him. But he goes short term, and I do think the Cubs were pretty deep in the mix. I definitely believe if that offer was not out from the Red Sox, I think we're looking at Alex Bregman this upcoming season in a Chicago Cubs uniform. I genuinely do believe that. So the final offer the Cubs made was 4 years at $115 million or something like that, $120 at most. Either way, that is a very solid offer from the Chicago Cubs and Jed Hoyer making some moves and a very good competitive offer, like I said. The problem that I do have here is the fact that he went on an interview and Tom Ricketts and all that, and he talked about it, and he kind of had to get permission or whatever like that because they might have to go over the luxury tax of $241 million, which is the first threshold this season. And the fact that you have to get ownership's blessing to do that is not really good on the ownership part. And, we get pretty critical on Tom Ricketts a lot. So I do have to applaud Jed Hoyer for putting out a very competitive offer. But for the fans that are not happy at him for not landing him, I mean, if we signed Alex Bregman to that contract, a lot of people would be saying it's an overpay, like I said when I saw that contract out for the Red Sox. Alex Bregman, to many, is a good player, but take out the deferrals, take out the signing bonuses or whatever. Alex Bregman is nowhere near worth $40 million, and that's just a fact. So I do think it was better off that we did not sign that contract, and the offer that Jed Hoyer made was pretty fair. 4-year deal at around like $30 million, just slightly under. That's a very fair offer, and that's something I honestly would have been willing to give Alex Bregman. So with that said, good on Bregman, I guess. Good on Scott Boras, who obviously gets a good contract for one of his clients. And Bregman will be in a Boston Red Sox uniform this upcoming season. And we're going to go to the next topic here, and that's just some quick trade rumors, because there were some trade rumors that really picked up for the Chicago Cubs between this episode and the previous one, particularly with the San Diego Padres. Obviously, way earlier in the offseason, I'm talking like November, we were talking about potentially seeing a deal with the Seattle Mariners for one of their pitchers. At first, we thought it was maybe someone like Logan Gilbert or maybe Brian Wu or Luis Castillo. That's the name that really started to pick up some big trade talk, and they wanted an offensive threat. They did not get that, and it looks like Luis Castillo is going to be a Seattle Mariner come next season. So talks really got big with the San Diego Padres because they had two pitchers in particular that were pretty hot on the trade market. Both of them were going to be free agents, and they both still very much will be. One of them was Michael King, who actually signed an arbitration deal with the Padres. He seemed less likely to move because the other pitcher that was really in trade rumors, and this was even before the Cubs were involved. I saw teams like the Baltimore Orioles involved and this and that. It's San Diego Padres pitcher Dylan Cease, who actually came to the Padres last offseason from the Chicago White Sox. So Dylan Cease is a very interesting target. He actually was drafted by the Cubs. He got traded to the White Sox in the Jose Quintana deal back in, I believe, 2017. So Dylan Cease, one of the better pitchers out there, and he's going to get paid like one next offseason if he goes to free agency, which, because he's a Scott Boras client, he most likely will. Even though a deal might not happen anymore, I would like to think it would, because Dylan Cease, like I said, very dominant pitcher. I know the price was pretty astronomical for the Chicago Cubs. I know they were asking at first for Matt Shaw and plus, which I thought was pretty ridiculous for most likely what's going to be a one-year rental. I also saw this rumor as well that I was pretty interested in. I know there were some other Cubs fans that weren't on board with this, but adding Robert Suarez, who is a relief pitcher for the Padres, along with Dylan Cease in a deal, so that's a little over like $20-something million on the payroll for the Cubs. Going back for the Padres, I'm assuming are some prospects, some young players. I do think if you were to package players somewhat like Javier Assad and Kevin Alcantara, and maybe you add a little bit more to that, I do think it's something I would be willing to do, because Alcantara, and we've talked about him in a previous episode, is not really going to get playing time. If Kyle Tucker were to leave, I'd rather have Owen Casey take over in right field than Alcantara. So that would make Alcantara expendable. Javier Assad, I've never been high on him, but again, he might be another trade chip in the future for the Cubs. So if you were to ship those two out for Dylan Cease and Robert Suarez, I wouldn't be against it. And Robert Suarez, I believe, is making $10 million. His contract is not good. So maybe that would drive the price down a little bit. But who knows? I think Robert Suarez, and I've seen clips of him, he's really a one-trick pony. He's really known for his fastball. He can hit at least 100 miles an hour on the fastball. So that's something to have in the back end of the rotation. He would probably be a setup role for Ryan Presley. And then pulling that out in the bullpen, too, would be incredible. So you probably have Ben Brown. I think he would flourish better in the bullpen. You would have, obviously, Porter Hodge. You'd obviously have Julian Merriweather and whoever else you want to put in there. They got a lot of help in the bullpen, and they drastically upgraded that, and they needed to. So if they wanted to do that, they could mix and match, and it would work pretty well. And then, obviously, with all the guys you have, then you put Ryan Presley, obviously, in the closer in the 9th inning, and then in the 8th inning, or maybe even some 7th innings here and there, Robert Suarez in the setup role. I like that for the Chicago Cubs a lot. And then you add Dylan Cease to the top of the rotation with Justin Steele, Shota Imanaga, Jameson Taillon, and Matt Boyd. That is, if that's able to come to fruition, the Cubs are cooking with gas. So I do think if a deal were to be possible, which even though the Padres don't seem like they could trade them, you never say never. So I wouldn't be fully against trading for those guys if the price is right. So we're going to see what happens between now and opening day. I do think the Cubs, even though Jed Hoyer said the team is close to being done, I do think deep down he's got another move up his sleeve. So we're going to see what that is. And especially because the Cubs miss out on Alex Bregman, which would have sacrificed like $30 million on the payroll. I still wonder if some moves are still in the works for the Cubs by the time opening day rolls around, which is in late March. So that's really all I have for that. And then finally, we're going to go over some personal expectations that I have for the Chicago Cubs, and we're just going to go over that right now. So firstly, we're going to go over the batting order. So I don't know how this is going to work out, but if I were Craig Counsell, I'd probably put Ian Happ at first. I would probably put Kyle Tucker at second, and maybe you put Seiya Suzuki at third, Michael Busch at fourth, Dansby Swanson at 5, Nico Horner at 6, Pete Crow Armstrong at 7, Matt Shaw at 8, and Miguel Amaya at 9. And a lot of those can be interchangeable. I do think the more Matt Shaw plays, the more higher he will go in the batting order. I do think Nico Horner could go down. Who knows? PCA could go up because he can definitely improve his offense. So we're just going to go little by little here. Ian Happ, I mean, all he's got to do is just continue raking. He had like 25 home runs, I believe, last year. So he was pretty solid offensively. Defensively, even better. So I don't really have a problem with Ian Happ in the leadoff slot. For Kyle Tucker, I mean, you just got to hope you're getting what you traded for. Obviously, a phenomenal defender, a very solid offensive right fielder for now the Cubs. But Kyle Tucker, he can definitely hit some home runs, and you just got to hope that he's going to be able to do that consistently. For Seiya Suzuki, he's going to be in the DH role. I know there was some frustration there because he wanted to be in the right field, but the truth is he wasn't good defensively last season, and even more, he was better in the DH role. He had better numbers offensively when he was just primarily a DH, and that's where he's going to be, and he's on board with that, so both sides are happy, and Suzuki even said, like, whatever Counsell wants to put me in, that's where I'll be, and you're going to see a lot of Suzuki in the DH position. Michael Busch, all you got to really hope for is not a sophomore slump because he hit like 21 home runs, I believe, last season. He was pretty solid offensively and even better defensively as well. He'll definitely win a Gold Glove with the Cubs, hopefully sometime soon. So for Michael Busch, you just got to hope that he doesn't get a sophomore slump. Dansby Swanson, he was not phenomenal. So you just got to hope he bounces back. Nico Horner, I want to see his offense improve a little bit. He only had like 8 home runs and like 50-something RBIs last year. So we know what you're getting from Nico Horner defensively, but I think if his offense can improve a little bit, maybe you can put him higher in the lineup and then he can get on base and maybe get a home run hitter to play cleanup in that role as well. I think Nico Horner could definitely improve his offense. For Pete Crow Armstrong, same thing. He was a rookie last year, so his offense struggled to start, but later on in the season, it just got better and better. So you just got to hope you see continued growth offensively for Pete Crow Armstrong. You know what you're going to get defensively from him. He's probably the best defensive center fielder in the game. But if he can improve his offense, then wow, like that's a phenomenal player right there. Matt Shaw, you really don't know what you're going to get from him to start off because he's a rookie. He hasn't played way too many MLB games, if not any at all yet. So I think putting him in the 7 or 8 role is best to start off. He definitely could work his way up as the season rolls on. So I don't think it's fair to judge what Matt Shaw can do yet, but I definitely think he can be a true offensive threat for the Chicago Cubs, so I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. And we'll definitely revisit this later on in the season and seeing where all these guys currently stand by the time I make that video. And we'll see where Matt Shaw especially is, because I definitely think he can be a true offensive threat, but right now I'm not 100% sure to see where he will be. And then Miguel Amaya at the 9 slot. I mean, his offense wasn't great last year, but he definitely showed signs of improvement later on in the season. So hopefully you get some kind of offense. I'm not expecting him to hit like 20 home runs or this and that. I'm not expecting him to be someone like Cal O'Reilly in Seattle, but if he can put up respectable offensive numbers, then I think he's doing pretty good as well. And I'm not expecting him to be a home run hitter, but if a lot of those guys can get on base and then have the top dogs hit home runs like they can, then the Cubs offense can really play well. But the truth is, last season I noticed a lot of repetition. If the offense played good, then the pitching didn't. If the pitching was stable, then the offense couldn't score. So hopefully those inconsistencies don't happen, and hopefully the offense can show some signs of improvement, because there are some individual players that can show signs of improvement. So the guys that I'm looking for the most to show signs of improvement, or bounce back efforts at least, are Dansby Swanson, Nico Horner as bounce back guys for improvement. I'd like to see guys like Pete Armstrong and Matt Shaw and maybe even Miguel Amaya. And the top 3 guys, I mean, you know what you're going to get from them. For Michael Busch, it's just hopefully he doesn't have a sophomore slump, and that's pretty much it. So with that, that's pretty much the episode. So give me your thoughts on everything I went over. And obviously, spring training, the first game for the Cubs will be on February 20th against the LA Dodgers. So now that spring training will officially be underway, I'll be starting to post a lot more consistently, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the Chicago Cubs will do this season. And I'll make some videos here and there during spring training to see how they do during spring training. I'll go over some highlights and big things that are going on in spring training with the Cubs and seeing what they can do. So anyways, like I said, give me your thoughts. And I said it previously in the video, if you're interested in the content, feel free to like and subscribe. Follow us on Twitter at Cubs360. And I'm Jack from Cubs360. This is our episode. And as always, go Cubs go.